Okay, I want to start this class with a little history walk. I want you to go back in time with me. Ironically, the setting is going to be very similar to what we've got right here, where you've got a teacher and a group of students. The teacher is a whole lot better looking than myself and incredibly a lot smarter than myself. His name is Albert Einstein. He's got much better hair than I do. Albert Einstein was teaching a group of students just like you all when he posed to them a question. He said, I want to talk to you today about something that has troubled me literally my entire life. And he began to look at each one of them individually. He said, I want to know from your ears what you think is the sum quantum total of everything that man has ever learned as far as our knowledge. And by that, he's basically saying, I want to know how much you think we know about everything around us, about science, about everything. And immediately, one of the students, who kind of reminds me of somebody in that room, one of the students raised his hand and said, Dr. Einstein, I think it would be about 80%. I think we have obtained about 80% of all there is to know in the field of science and mankind. And Albert Einstein kind of looked at him, paused for just a moment, and he said, 80%. And he literally just kind of gave him a Well, immediately the class was very perceptive. They realized Albert Einstein didn't agree with this guy, so one of the other students raised his hand. He said, I really think the number would be closer to about 60%. Albert Einstein said, oh, okay, 60%. Class realized what was going on. Somebody else raised their hand and said, no, I think it would be closer to 40%. And Albert Einstein looked around and he said, so you believe we've only our sum quantum of knowledge about what is around us, about the universe, about everything is 40%. And finally, a humble person in the back raised their hand very silently, meekly, humbly, and said, Dr. Einstein, I think it would be 20% or less. And it was at that moment that Einstein smiled because he could relate to what this person was saying. Now, I want you to keep that in mind. And I want to ask you a question for just a moment. How many of you guys in there know what a Google is? And I'm not talking about the internet search engine.
I don't know. Big number.
Okay? What kind of big number?
Real big.
It is a 1 followed behind by 100 zeros. Okay? I want you guys to imagine, if you will, as we start out, that you've got 5 million Googles and multiply that by 20 trillion Googles. And then once you get the answer to that, I want you then to take that to the 3,000th Google and multiply it by itself.
Okay, can't do that.
Now, here's the situation, guys. The reason why I want to deal in those kind of numbers is I want everybody in that room to understand that mankind does not know a fraction of 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 what Jehovah God knows. Are we all in agreement that in the real, true comprehension of knowledge that we're basically a dust speck? Actually, we are a dust speck on the rusty hubcap of a 1974 Datsun B210. That's where we are, okay? Some of y'all know what a Datsun B210 is. Now, that being the case, if God is infinitely wise, then all of the stuff that we're talking about in this class, even though today and next week we're going to be talking about some very emotional, some things that are going to draw out a lot of opinion, ultimately, what is the only thing that we can go to for wisdom and knowledge?
Bible.
Period. Guys, I'm going to tell you, there's some things that I'm going to say probably in today's class or next week's class that some of you may not agree or like very much. But ultimately, if we all step back and realize God is the only entity that has complete knowledge. And in fact, everything you know right now, you know because He allowed you to know. As long as we understand that He is in control, He is full of knowledge, and that the only place where real knowledge comes from is from this book right here, then we can make our decisions in a correct fashion. So as you think about that, as we're talking about what should we do in some of these cases, I want you to understand there is an ultimate guide, and it has nothing to do with your emotions, your opinions, your beliefs. Because ultimately, we are like that dust speck on a rusty hubcap in the cosmos of the world. That's all we are. Now, let's do one more little mind expansion project just to kind of land the plane completely here. Let me ask you, I want to see a show of hands in just a minute. Who all do you think is more religious? I'm going to give you 4 people. Who do you think is more religious? Billy Graham, Billy Clinton, Billy the Kid, or Wild Bill Hitchcock?
So I was going to go with Billy.
There's your 4 choices.
I was waiting for Billy Carter.
All right. Who are you waiting for?
Billy Carter.
Billy Carter. Let's see a show of hands for Billy Graham. Dude, nobody in there likes Billy Graham. Okay. All right, what about, who believes that Billy Carter would be more religious?
Billy
No President Bill Carter? Or Clinton? Billy Clinton, I'm sorry.
That's his
Billy Clinton, shall we say. Let's go back to Billy Clinton.
Billy Clinton.
That is.
How many of you think Billy Clinton is the most religious out of all those? Okay, that's not too many. What about Billy the Kid?
I'd say none of them are religious.
Okay, what about Wild Bill Hitchcock?
Well, I didn't raise my hand for the rest of them.
Well,
Bill
Okay. Whoever said it, you were right. It was a trick question.
none of them are religious.
All of them are religious, guys. And part of the reason I've got to get you guys to stop thinking in a fashion that some people are religious and some people are not religious, because the Bible teaches very clearly in Romans chapter 1, all men are religious. But it depends on who we actually worship. Somebody read to me Romans chapter 1, verses 20 through 25.
I'll think of more. For since the
And I
creation
want
of the
you-
world, His invisible
Pay attention. Listen. Hold on just a second. Pay close attention to verse 25. Go ahead.
For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures. Therefore God gave them over in the lusts of their heart to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen.
Okay, here's the point, guys. In Romans chapter 1, Paul is telling us everybody, every single person on the planet is religious. However, some have consciously chose to worship the creature rather than the Creator. And the reason I'm telling you that is because as we look at these topics and all topics, I want you to come to the clear conclusion that there really is no neutral ground. Even though the world would oftentimes like you to believe that there's there's areas that are neutral, that we can basically believe things and it's not going to affect us one way or the other. We are either for God or we're against God. Period. And that's basically in all aspects of our life. So as we're talking about Christian ethics in this class, I need you to understand, yeah, there's a lot that we're going to discuss that the world says and the world views and all that kind of thing. But ultimately, every single human being worships something. The question is, do they worship a creator or a creature? And by that, I mean, are they following God's plan and God's pattern, or have they basically professed themselves to be wise? They're really foolish, and as such, they're following their own pattern. I can't stress to you enough the difference between understanding that textbooks are simply books made by fallible men who don't have a clue when it comes to the grand scheme of things versus the wisdom and knowledge of God. I don't know that anybody in that room or this room truly comprehends the magnitude of that statement. Once you start getting it, once you have that eureka moment where you're like, wait a second, I kind of get what he's talking about here, it will literally change your life and how you perceive, and you ask God for wisdom. Because when you suddenly realize, yeah, we got all this mess on the earth that we've been able to, quote, come up with, but ultimately, man is still ignorant. And when you think about how many times we make mistakes and how many times we postulate theories and we go down ethics paths and we do all these things, but we have to change things because deep down we make mistakes and we're ignorant. And yet God never has to. All of the stuff that I'm communicating to you in this class, if you can get God's wisdom, you will never have to change your mind. You'll never have to go back and say, well, you know, maybe we need to tweak it a little bit because things have changed. Ultimately, if you get wisdom from God, you won't have to change anything. All right. Let's start with Mr. John Warren's in the front of the class. Please, sir, if you can step forward and let everybody know kind of what you asked, what you found out, and then, guys, I want you to be listening because I'm expecting you to comment on what he's talking about.
Did you get my survey, by the way?
I sure did. I've already looked at it, brother.
You looked at, when the data I sent it to you, got it okay?
I sure did. In fact, I'll bring it up while you're talking. How about that?
Okay, well, that's fine. Let's make it sure. All right, I titled this survey Family Matters. I was intrigued to see what I would be finding in the 50 surveys that I conducted. I actually had 63 surveys that I got back, but I wanted to keep within that 20% parameter of the members of the church only, 20% to 10. And so I kicked out 13 of them. You could do that as you're a pollster, I guess. So.
Yes, Mr. Rasmussen, would you please tell us what you found?
Call me Mr. Gallup. I prefer that.
Gallup, Mr. Gallup.
Well, let's see here. First of all, I received 10 from the member of the Lord's Church, 10 surveys. I went across the street here from Bear Valley. I went up and down just the street, knocked at some doors to get asked them if they would conduct a survey with me. And I think I got 6 or 7 from across the street here. And Brother Nelson, I know you live right down here, and I made sure I didn't ruin any relationship that you have developed with these people. They spoke highly of you, those who knew you. So, the youngest person I did a survey with was 18 years old. He was a single guy from working at Little Caesar's Pizza. And the oldest was a 73-year-old Filipino who had retired from working as a civil service job at Subic Bay in the Philippines. And that gave him the opportunity to move to the United States, so he brought his family 10 years back here. And he was working at Walgreens as a cashier, so it was nice to meet quite a few different types of people. 58% of the survey was done by men, 42% females. I had 52% of them were married, 46 were single, and 2% at least admitted that they were divorced. I'm not sure about any of those singles were divorced or The age group, up to 19 years old, I had 6% took the survey. From 20 to 29 years old, 36%. 30 to 39, 18%. 40 to 49, 18%. And 50 and older was 22% that took the poll. My son-in-law's father, Stephen Bookout, took the test, and he said, John, next time you do a survey, would you add an extra age grouping so I'm not the oldest, I'm 50 years old, I have to put myself in the oldest age group. I didn't feel so comfortable about it.
200, 150.
The first question I asked him was, how many children, because this kind of pertains to me a little bit, I was just curious to see how they would answer this. How many children is too many for a family? And I broke it down into 5 answers. You had 1 to 2, you had 3 to 4, 5, I set 5 alone, and then 6 or more, or no limit, or unlimited. I only got 4% to say 1 to 2, and most of those were, I think all those were when they said 2 is too many. The 3 to 4 children was 26%, 5 was at 24%, 8% was at 6 or more, and there was a whopping 30% that said there should be no limit. Now, all the Christians that did the survey said no limit. Okay, so the 10 of the 50 were members of the church said no limit. Now, that means that there was another 25% of the 40 non-Christians, which would be another 10, said no limit. I was kind of shocked at that to see that
But I think your next question, though, is more telling.
It is. It really is. I was surprised. The next question I asked them was, should the amount of income determine the family size? 60% said yes. 36% said no. And then 4% said depends. And that wasn't even an option, but they kept saying, no, it depends. I said, okay, add it as an answer. But 60% of them said, yes, the income should be a determinant.
Okay, let me interject right here, John, for just a minute, just because I want to make sure the class understands something in a historical context. From a historical context, less than 75 years ago, the measure of affluence was actually how many children you had. And by that I mean children were viewed as being able to help on the farm or help bring in income. It's only been within the last 75 years that teens have kind of taken on a freeloader approach, and we now view them as a siphon rather than as a contribution. So, this is one of those interesting things. If you'd asked this question 100 years ago, folks would say, absolutely, the size definitely matters in a positive direction. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's great. So am I still affluent?
You're extremely affluent. Of course, you're affluent in some ways, but you got so many freeloaders, man. You just got to work on the freeloaders. Anthony is such a freeloader.
That is unfortunate. He never uses it, right? All right. The third question was, in the case where there is a marriage without children, should the woman carry part of the financial income responsibility? 42% said yes, 10% said no, and I did add a third answer option that depends on, and I left a big blue blank for them. And we had a wide range of answers on the depends. That 48% said depends. So the majority of the people said it depends on, and they gave their answer. And mostly it was, and Brad, you'll get this in the hard copies that you'll get, but most of them were, it depends on the income of the husband. Or some said the lifestyle. Some said, well, it's the choice of the woman. Some others said it is between the two, they should make that decision between the husband and the wife. So, again, that was 42% said yes, and 48% said depends. And then the next question was, in the case where there is a marriage with children still at home, so we went from no children to children at home, should the mother work outside the home? This went down, the yeses went down to 16%. The no's went up to 18%. and the dependents went way up to 66%. So there was, still a lot of people. The majority was dependent upon, but it increased to nearly 70% when you have a child at home. The final question I asked them was, what's more important? And I told them that all of these, in my opinion, are important, but now, what would be most important if you had to prioritize? And I asked them, what's more important? Financial security, time spent with friends or family, good health, or vacations? And I gave them a final one to say other. They could fill in whatever they wanted. 12% said financial security. The majority, 46%, said time spent with friends and family, so that was encouraging to me as an American citizen. But, some people do care about their family and spending time with them. 26% said good health. No one said vacations, and I was thankful for that. And other, 16% said other, and some of those included, time of worship to God. I wanted to give that option to see who would add something maybe that was good time spent with God or worshiping with the family. And majority of those Christians that I did the survey with said either time spent with family or other, and they included God as the other priority. And that's all I have.
All right, guys, let's take just a second. What are some other questions? Either maybe follow-up questions after assimilating all of this. What would be a follow-up question or two that might be pertinent in assimilating all of this information?
To ask whom? The people that you surveyed? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm not going to send you guys back out, but if he were to go back out to those same exact people and ask one or two follow-up questions in order to kind of round out this study, what would that be?
No idea.
Maybe how many children they currently have, and maybe get a percentage on that so you can kind of tally up the results.
Excellent question. And the reason why, Dustin, is because it would be interesting to see if individuals who are coming from large families are the ones approving of large families.
Right.
Maybe their earning bracket, like how much they earn per year, maybe, I don't know.
Okay? So financially, where are they at? How do they view children? What about religiosity? What about religiosity as far as maybe get a little bit of where they're coming from, are you a believer? Are you believing in the Bible, et cetera, et cetera? Because I think that would be interesting to see, to be able to take the people who say, hey, I think it's okay for you to have a big family, and to see if these are the religious folks or the non-religious folks. Anything else? Yeah, John?
I've got to add, I had a couple, I had one guy who said he has 5 children, but he said, I think it should be 2. That's too many. 5's too many.
Did you really?
Okay, which 3 you're going to get rid of,
Exactly.
And now I had a person outside the church who did give me the option of God as far as priorities. And I thought he claimed to be a Messianic Jew.
Okay.
He answered some things very interesting. He was a 22-year-old working at a gas station. A lot of people offered sometimes their life story and their curiosity as to what I was doing. So I've got some openings there. I'm going to follow up on too.
Good, guys. Part of the reason I sent you out like that was because I want you to interact with people. I want you to see what it's like. One of the mistakes that we make in a preaching school is you all are in a bubble for 2 years, and it's easy to forget the fact that there are a lot of different kinds of people out there. And this lets you put a little bit of what we're trying to teach you into practice, sending you out and basically putting you toe-to-toe with people who may not share your beliefs or who may be curious about what you are, why you're doing this, that kind of thing. Mr. Dustin is up next. Ladies and gentlemen, can we get a good big hand for Mr. Dustin? All right. By the way, y'all didn't have authority to clap. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Oh, we're not allowed to do that at the school.
Oh.
All right, so
No, we didn't.
I did mine
Do they do that in math?
on stem cell research. And the reason I wanted to do something on stem cells is because of my recent ignorance on what stem cell was. My sister had contracted diabetes, and after that happened, I was all for stem cell research to cure. And I wasn't sure how they were going to get the stem cells or what they would do to get the stem cells, but after going through the class, it became more interesting to me, so I wanted to see what the public thought about it. So I decided to select 6 questions that I felt that would give me a handle on what exactly people meant or what people thought about it. I wanted to ask questions to get if they had any background in stem cells, or if they had somebody that they were emotionally attached to that maybe could be cured with stem cells. Because of my recent experience, as soon as my sister contracted it, I was emotionally attached to it. Meaning I had an emotional feeling in my heart that I wanted her to be cured no matter what it takes. And until I sat in this classroom, did my mind change on what I knew was biblical and what I knew was not biblical. So I asked to see if they knew it, if they had known anybody with the disease, if they knew anybody that, if that person specifically could be cured with the disease, and how old of the person was with that disease. And I asked those 3 questions were mainly to get that emotional detachment. I wanted to be able to look at my surveys and say, well, this person's emotionally detached maybe as I was, so you got to put that into the account with the rest of their answers to answer. Also, I wanted the age of the person. Oftentimes, when you're talking about a younger person, that emotional attachment is a lot heavier than somebody of an older person. I had one person answer a survey with the fact that, well, this person's old, and, you know, it wasn't important as if it was maybe their son or daughter. To contradict or to go on the other side of that, I had one lady who told me that she had in vitro fertilization, and she gave me a whole life story and how one of her children could have been affected by stem cells. And her answers were a lot deeper than somebody who didn't know anybody that could be affected with it. So I wanted to kind of touch on that basis. And then when I'm getting down into the actual stem cells, the questions on my stem cells, I asked questions like, are they aware of the different types of stem cells or stem cell research, where they're able to harvest stem cells? And I was blown away of this question in contact with the question of, do you know if that person that has the disease can be cured with stem cells? Most people know somebody that have some sort of disease, but most people also don't realize if that person can be cured with stem cell research. Okay? And throughout my findings, I noticed the people who said, well, I'm not sure if that person can be cured with their disease, also came down and said to the fact of, well, I don't think harvesting a stem cell from a human embryo is ethical. That was another finding that blew my mind. Now, I'll kind of tell you what I did. I went to the mall, and I stood outside Target. Okay? I had no idea that stem cell research was so controversial. And it blew me away. It blew my mind. What happened to me was, I stood outside the mall for about an hour and a half, and I am not shy. I went up to anybody who walked in the mall. I didn't care if they were 15 or if they were being pushed in a wheelchair. During the hour and a half I was there, I had 10 people agree to take the survey. And every single one of those people, as they took the survey, they read the top that said stem cell research, handed it right back, and walked in without saying anything. Blew me away. I could not believe that. And I even went to, I started using different tactics. I'm thinking, well, maybe if I go to them, maybe not as boisterous, maybe just go to them a little more humble. I even
Come here,
started-
little boy. I'll give you some candy.
Yeah. I didn't know what to do, but
Take this.
I even resulted to, hey, I'm a Bible student. This is a non-Bible survey. And after I did that, unfortunately, nobody took the survey. But it kind of opened my eyes to the fact of the ignorance people have on stem cell research. As we learned in here, the fact of the matter is stem cell research, most of the good being done is from umbilical cord or adult stem cells, not the embryos. But people don't know that. They're unaware of those methods. So when you say stem cells, they're all of a sudden going, I'm going to stay away from that.
Yep.
And that was something that kind of caught me off guard. And I didn't get any percentages like John did. I was very unsure on how the survey was supposed to go. I've never actually done a survey and handed it out. But I wanted to get people's feelings. I wanted to get their emotions. I wanted to get what they knew and what they didn't know. And my results were people don't know enough about stem cell research. And maybe if they did, they would be more prone to things like, well, we can save the umbilical cord or ethical ways too. And maybe more people would have taken my survey if they would have realized, hey, there's more out there than just this two-dimensional stem cell research.
Dustin, let me throw this out to you while you're talking about that. Do you now understand why it is very easy for the media to persuade the general public any direction they want to?
Right, yeah, because the ignorance. I mean, and like I said, I sat right here in this class, not understanding anything about it. And I thought, as soon as I seen on the syllabus that we're going to talk about stem cells, I went, all right, I can really get them on this. And then he starts, and then, that's how people think. That's how they do it. I mean, that's how the media does it. The media says that people are ignorant about it, so we're going to be sharks, and we're going to give them this stuff. And that's why I think it's important, now for me especially, becoming a minister, the importance of knowing this stuff, so I can biblically give them info. And just to end it off, I had a lady that I know well, really well, Christian lady. She came back with me with a response that blew me away. She had children via in vitro fertilization. And when I had asked her on the survey, one of my questions was, do you realize when they harvest stem cells from a human embryo, that kills the human embryo? And it hit home with her. And my 2 or 3 line questions that were normal became a paragraph question. Or answer, talking about, well, my kids are this, and my kids are that, and I think it's okay if this, and it was emotional that was talking. It wasn't factual.
Right.
It was emotional feelings that got her brought up into this, and that really, it scared me, because I love this lady with all my heart. And we need to sit down and talk. I got to do tons more research so I can prepare myself, but that's what I kind of found in my survey, in my analysis. It blew my mind. It's awesome. But yeah, so that's what I got.
Good deal. Good deal. Guys, what would you follow up with this one on?
Would they like more information concerning themselves?
Oh yeah, that would be prime. If you've got something you can print out, an article or a track or something, that would have been the icing on the cake, is to be able to put something in their hand. What else?
Well, I know like I said, I'd like to go get more info and go out and talk, especially to the person that I know really well, and say, hey, listen. Because when it comes to an emotional deal like that, how do you talk to them effectively if it's their children?
Okay, Dustin, what you're talking about right now is why I started the class the way I did, and that is, at some point we got to realize all of the stuff that we're talking about is very emotional. It conjures up, because everybody in the room either knows of somebody who has had something wrong with them, is going through something, has a sickness or disease. So it's, we've got these tentacles that tie us to some of these topics. The question is, can we detach ourselves personally and fall back to wisdom, which is God's Word? And that's what we've got to get people to see is, ultimately, it doesn't matter what man thinks. We've got to get our direction from God. Come on down! James Coker is the next contestant on the Practice Ranks.
Who's your dad?
Dan
Hold on, before you get going, let me pull you up here. All right, go ahead.
All right, I did my survey last Saturday in Woodland Park. I chose to do that there because that's where I've taken a position as the full-time minister. So I sort of wanted to get the overall feel of what the morality was of that town.
Good.
Last Saturday, I asked the elders for $40, and they gave me $40, and I had a hard time getting people to take the survey before I went to Woodland Park. That's what made me go to Woodland Park. But once I said, hey, I'll give you $1 if you fill out this survey, they did. And
So you bribed people to take your survey. That's nice.
I was
Okay.
taking their time away. At least I could give them $1 and make them feel like they did something. So
Okay. All right.
Do the elders know about that?
the elders did. The elders gave me money, so I didn't take it out of the collection.
Wait. Just to be clear, James Coker paid 50 people who went out and bought alcohol right afterwards.
Only 40. 10 of them were the church.
Oh,
Maybe
okay,
they
okay.
did buy alcohol. I don't know. But,
Okay.
alcohol can you get for $1?
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I went downtown Woodland Park. Woodland Park's about 4,000 people big. It's really the center town of a county that's about 7,000. So I felt like that was a good place to be. It was right across from the church building in the downtown plaza. So that's where I asked my questions. And these really weren't questions. These were statements. I asked 15 of them. I wanted to ask that many because I wanted to get an overall feel for it. And I didn't just single it out like Dustin did. I asked from every different kind of, from a more moral stance to a more religious stance. I asked a wide array of questions. And I chose 15, so when I read the statement, they had only two options, agree or disagree. I didn't make it too exhaustive for them. I didn't know how long this would take, so I just figured the more simple, the quicker, the better it would be. My first question was, there are acceptable situations in which one may lie. 90% of people agreed. Two of those being from the church. Two of those two from the church cited Rahab as their excuse for being able to lie. They said that, lying's not good, but there are situations where you can actually lie. Second, I asked if marriage was for everyone, regardless of sexual orientation. 24% agreed. All of these statements were stated in the way to where if you agreed, that was the more, as we would see it, the more unethical view. 24% agreed that marriage is for everyone, regardless if you're gay or not. The third statement was medical marijuana clinics should continue being legal in Colorado. That's a very big subject here in Colorado. 16% agreed with that statement. Public prayer should be forbidden in all public schools. 12% agreed. That kind of shocked me when I looked at the 15th statement, which we'll get to. Prostitution should be legalized. 8% agreed. Divorce is acceptable for any reason. 68% agreed, with one in the church.
Oh, wow.
Sexually immoral government officials should be terminated from their positions. 64% agreed with that one. Intelligent design should not be taught in schools. 20% agreed, with a few of those being in the church. Many people have just bought into the evolution. I've got some work to do.
Although, James, the other side of that is you got 80% who are saying it should be taught.
That's right. That's exactly right. The town of Woodland Park is very denominational. Everyone really does claim to be religious. But still, even out of those religions, and a few of those being out of the church, they still thought evolution exclusively should be taught. Sexual awareness should be taught without abstinence in public schools. 40% agreed.
Wow.
Any Judeo-Christian symbol should be removed from government buildings and property. 18% agreed. Abortion destroys the mother. 46% agreed. Embryonic stem cell research should be legalized. 84% agreed.
Wow.
Number 13 said...
There you go, Dustin.
Yep, that's exactly right. Number 13 said homosexuality and other alternative lifestyles should be taught and promoted in public schools. 22% agreed. Number 14, one could steal for noble purposes, such as feeding your family. 30% agreed. And this 15th statement is not designed to be agreed with the more unethical view. I asked, are you a religious person? 96% people said yes.
Wow.
That's pretty alarming when you go back and say, well, public schools
Right.
clear, you know? It was
68% say divorce is fine. A bunch of them want homosexuality taught in schools. But, oh, yeah, by the way, I'm a religious person.
Yeah, and see, people in the church don't even understand divorce or remarriage, much less people in denominations or people that have no religious affiliations.
Right.
That's a big topic.
Very good. Thank you very much, guys. What would you add, or how would you follow up with that?
He's going to be following up when he takes that job here in a couple of months.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, in all seriousness, James, what you did was brilliant.
It was.
Because what you did was brilliant, because that's going to give you some solid foundation on what you need to go in and address.
Yep.
Because, while some of these people are not in the church, they are having conversations and interactions on a daily basis with these people. And so if their coworkers and their friends and their whatever hold to some of these ethical standards, one of the first things you got to do is go in and shore up your own people and say, look, folks, here's what we know about X, Y, Z.
And to add to that, Brad, when I interviewed, or we went through and talked about some doctrines, when they asked me where I stood on everything, we were in agreement. But they left out two areas, and one was really interesting. I asked them what their view was from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11, and they said that they really weren't prepared to answer that. The elders didn't even ask me that. I couldn't even believe that. Now, they said they don't believe in evolution, but I don't understand why that wouldn't have been one of their questions. So.
Yeah. Wow. Any other comments, questions, guys? Mr. KJ.
Where's my thoughts, Brad?
Oh, sorry. Yes, very nice.
The goal of my survey was, I asked solely on abortion, and I was really interested to see what people that I went to high school with thought about abortion. So I did mine via Facebook, so I could actually target a certain age group. And I did get some older people as well that I knew. And I was actually really surprised by what my survey revealed. First question I asked was, should abortion be a religious issue? And actually every person that I asked, all 50 people, said yes, including Christians and non-Christians, which most of the people I went to in high school, that I went to school in high school with, were non-Christians. And they all said it should be a political issue, or a religious issue. And then I asked if it should be a political issue. And 5 or 6 out of 50 said no, and then the rest said yes as well. And then I asked if they believed that life began at conception. And 2 Christians said no, actually, that were younger. And then a couple non-Christians said no as well. And then the rest said yes. And then I asked, have they ever known anybody who had an abortion, like what Dustin said, to kind of get a feel of whether or not they're, going to relate to this emotionally, or whether they're just doing this. If you don't know somebody that's had an abortion, or I guess it's easier to say that abortion is wrong if you don't know what that person went through. So I asked that question, and I had actually a lot more yeses than I was hoping for, and I actually had like almost half said yes. So that was really sad, because I was hoping that that kids my age wouldn't, or younger than me, wouldn't know that many people with abortions, but almost half said yes. And then I asked the next question: would you encourage a teen with an unwanted child to get an abortion? And 100% of the answers were no on that one. So actually, I had one yes. So
I was gonna say you got somebody Kern that did say yes on that one.
yes. So yeah, we had one person that said yes on that one. So that was encouraging, as well, to know that that they wouldn't encourage somebody else to get an abortion except for that one person. And then I asked them, did they believe that adoption was a viable alternative to abortion? And I got some no's, but mostly yeses on that one. So that's good, because I mean, adoption is the viable alternative. And the next question I asked was, should underage teens have the option to have an abortion with parental consent? And the answers to that one were mostly no, with a couple of yeses again. And by the same people, the two Christians that were that agreed that life did not begin at conception. Well, actually no. But then I asked, do you believe that abortion is acceptable if the woman is raped? And I got a lot more yeses than I was expecting on that question as well. And I actually got 8 on that one. So they believe that it's the baby's fault that the dad raped, or the person raped the girl. And then I asked, should a woman have a right to decide what happens to her body? And a lot of people said, not with regards to the baby, but yes. So that kind of, I didn't know whether or not to put yes or no on that one, so I kind of just judged because whether or not they clarified it. And then the last one I asked is, should abortion be legal in America? And majority were no. So that was really good. I only had five yeses on that one. So 45 of people my age or a little bit older believe that abortion should not be legal in America. So,
And to put that into perspective, guys, that's 90% of everybody he surveyed. 90% says no, we should not have this as a legal option. So before I let you step down and before I turn it over to the class, I just got to ask one question.
Mm-hmm.
Is your tie pink?
It is purple, Brad.
Lavender, I think.
Okay, all right.
And it's very cute.
I needed to know if you were that strong of a man that you felt comfortable wearing pink. So that's good.
All right.
All right. Wait, what do you guys think? What should be some follow up, or what maybe did he miss out on? I can think of one right off the bat.
I've got a question that I'd like to have added, and this is
Yep.
back to Dustin too. Do you think, and maybe he did ask this, do you think the media is telling you the whole truth on stem cell research
Good
or
question.
when life begins? That would be an interesting question.
Yeah. Very good. KJ, you focused on a single topic, which I like. And your leading question was, should abortion be a religious issue? But what did you forget to ask him?
What religion were they?
Are you religious?
Yeah, I knew. That's why I didn't.
Okay.
So I knew everybody got surveyed. So.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts that come to mind for him?
Can I go next to get my own?
It's over with.
Absolutely. Somebody just wanting to go. That's
not.
jump out there.
Dark and cool, baby. But his tie does have pink in it, Brad.
Yeah, this is more pink than KJ's is.
Man, if that's pink, then this screen, we got some serious problems with the screen.
My tie's actually black.
Quinn's actually a woman.
All right. I originally, what I did was just ask the question: are you for or against surrogacy, contracted surrogacy? Before I had 3 questions: surrogacy, stem cell, and in vitro, and nobody really knew what those were. So it was getting real hard. So I just did 1 question: are you for or against contracted surrogacy? 35 people took the survey. 4 of them were Christians. The rest they would claim to be Christians, but they're really not. I can say that. The age group was 29. Are you for contracted surrogacy? Yes, no, and why? 6 said yes. 29 said no. One of the reasons, a lady named Jessica, she says she's against it because the only reason would be for money on the contracted woman who's having the baby. Second, it would have an impact. She's not for it because it would have an impact on the birth mother emotionally. Stephen, non-Christian, are you for contract surrogacy? He says no. It's just like outsourcing your kid. So he's definitely against that. I told him to be brief in there. A friend of mine, Rebecca, says there is no way for a surrogate mother to not form an attachment with the baby, vice versa, male included. Therefore, taking that baby away that she's grown attached to. Gentleman named this kid right here. He's I think 15. Are you for contracted surrogacy? He didn't know what it was, but I have a definition right there for it. And I talked to him. He says no because humans have no right to create another human. So I thought it was kind of cool that a little kid knew that. Also, last one is from Christy. Are you for or against her? She says no. I would not feel that it would be my child if someone else was having my kid. Also, there's adoption, which is available. The emotional connection that one would get that would be uncontrolled. God made birth something private and very intimate between two, which is beautiful and should be kept within the marriage bed. So we should adopt.
All right, guys. What should be some follow up? What other questions, thoughts? One of the first things that comes to my mind is, do any of these people know somebody that's attached to that topic? To see if that sways, because obviously if you've got a sister or a cousin who has participated in this, do you think that's going to sway your belief system on it?
Yeah.
Goes back to what we were talking about, an emotional attachment.
Right.
So you want to know, are these people emotionally attached to their answer? What else? Oh, come on. I can think of an easy one. Yeah, John.
Well, I mean, with all of our surveys and the ethics class we're taking, we can be asking everybody if they're religious or not, because that's, it's all tied in with the emotion.
Right. Yeah, the two questions, Quentin, that I think would be great follow-ups. Number one, how would you define yourself religiously? Number two, does the amount of money matter? Because, guys, think about it. If you tell somebody, hey, you're going to get $75,000, all you got to do is spit out a kid, versus you're going to get $5,000. Well, if somebody is truly tied to an ethical standard, money's not going to matter. But if they aren't tied to an ethical standard, you find out real quick, because they're going to say, hey, You know, if I pay off my house, yeah, I'll kick them out. In fact, I'll kick them out and give me a car.
Goodness. True.
How much are they charging for that? I didn't see that anywhere in anything that I've read.
I think most are getting somewhere between 10 and 15 grand.
That's it? 10, 15?
That's not bad change, brother.
For 9 months? No.
Quentin's a baller, though.
It's like my watch cost that, man.
We know you're talking.
All right, who would like to go next? Chris. Sure, man. I'm not used to people actually volunteering. Obviously, y'all haven't been in the military.
I'm pretty old, so.
That's why I'm not up there.
He speaks truth.
I'm in the military.
The prophet.
Describe pretty old.
35. Well, wait a minute. Time out.
Older than,
It depends on what you look like.
older than Quentin and Dean.
How did I get brought into this? I didn't say anything, man. Oh, goodness.
I've got your survey in front of me, Chris.
I'll be 23 in one young buck.
Okay, my survey, I entitled it Practical Ethics. I was trying to kind of go with what we're supposed to do according to syllabus to gauge the ethical standards for a particular community. So I kind of went across the board. The youngest individual to take the survey was 13, and then the oldest was older than John, and considerably older.
Second shot.
But asked 16 questions, and I got back. By the time I turned this into you, I had I think 57, 52, something like that. I've gotten some more responses since then.
Okay.
I'll kind of discuss that in a little toward the end.
Which, by the way, guys, listen very carefully to what Chris is going to say, especially when he gets towards the end, because some of the stuff that he put out or some of the findings that he made at the end are exceptionally telling for our society as far as where they get their belief system. Go ahead.
I think so too. And I try to go from sort of general questions at the beginning to things that were more specific real-life situations. First question was, do you believe it is possible for something to be absolutely or universally true or untrue? 69% of the people said yes, and I was actually kind of surprised, or pleasantly surprised at that. And since some of the results have come in since I turned this into you, that number has increased, so it's a larger percentage. 19% said no, 6% said they were, 12% said they were unsure, 19% said no. Second question I asked is, do you believe it is possible for something to be absolutely or universally right or wrong? And the numbers were quite similar, which I was also pleasantly surprised about. I tried to ask that question. I wanted to kind of draw that distinction between truth and error and right and wrong. So 71% of the respondents said that yes, they believe it is possible for something to be absolutely right or wrong. 21% said no, and 8% said they were unsure. Third question I asked is, do you believe that advertisers regularly practice deception in promoting their products? 69% of the people said often. 29% of the people said occasionally. I had one individual who said rarely, and I tried to steer clear of people who drink a lot, but fourth question I asked is, do you believe most businesses deal fairly with their employees? And 53% of the respondents said occasionally, 33% said often, 7% said rarely, and nobody said never. Then I asked, do you believe most businesses deal fairly with their customers or their clientele? And 40% of the people responded occasionally, 44% responded often, and 16% responded rarely. And then I asked, do you believe, and then I moved into some of the more real-life situations and got a little bit more specific and more personal. Do you believe it is acceptable to tell a lie if you personally might benefit from it? And I was very pleasantly surprised at this number. 76% of the people responded no. I thought that was going to be a smaller number. And then I followed that up with, do you believe it is acceptable to tell a lie if someone else might benefit from it? And that was a smaller number, which I expected, but it was still 69% of the people still said no to that, which I was encouraged by. And the next question I asked is, do you believe it is acceptable to call in sick to work or school when healthy in order to spend time with loved ones? And 49% of the people said yes to that.
Okay, let's stop right there for just a minute, guys. I hope you're paying attention. His sixth question was, do you believe it's acceptable to tell a lie if you personally might benefit from it? Roughly 75% say, no, you should never do that. Now he comes back and he says, do you believe it's acceptable to call in sick to work or school when you're healthy in order to spend time for loved ones? 50% say, yeah, that's cool, no problem.
And I mean, the same would be true of the seventh question. Do you believe it's acceptable to tell a lie if someone else might benefit from it?
Right.
There's no difference there.
Right.
And that really, I think, points up the problem of situational ethics, as opposed to
absolutely
the standard. And get back to the first question, you believe something is universally true or untrue. The second question, an overwhelming number of the people would say something that would not be consistent with situational ethics, and yet when it gets specific, then they turn around and reveal that they believe in that. Ninth question, do you believe it is acceptable to call in sick to work or school when healthy in order to attend a recreational event? 69% of the people said no. I thought this one was a gimme. I was surprised that 23% said yes, and then 8% of the people said they were unsure.
Oh, goodness.
But there again, that's situational ethics, because it's kind of like you're saying, okay, can you call in sick if you're going to spend time with loved ones? 50% say yes. Can you call in sick if you want to go play, tennis? You got less that say it's okay. What changes in the situation to make one lie better than the other lie?
Exactly. The 10th question I asked is, do you believe it is acceptable to exceed the posted speed limit if running late for an important appointment? And 71% of the people said no, and I was bored.
You got some liars on that one right there, man.
And I try to ask questions of things that have kind of been difficult for me at various points, and this one is a difficult thing for me. So, but yeah, I was shocked that people would just lie like that.
Are you lying right now?
I think when making a purchase, a cashier returns $5 more than you are due. Would you give it back or keep it? And this question and the next question are I found very interesting as well, the differences in the numbers. Because 88% of the people who took my survey responded that they would give back the $5. And then the next question I asked is, if when making a purchase you notice an item is clearly mislabeled with a price lower than the retailer intended, would you say nothing and pay the lower price, or point out the mistake and pay the intended price? And 61% of the people said they would say nothing and pay the lower price.
So we'll give them cash back, but if they got a price on our clothing, we're not gonna say anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting too, because you're talking about $5 in cash, but if the retailer makes a mistake for $10, you're going to let the retailer eat the $10 mistake, and
right.
What's the difference? 13th question I asked is, if asked by your employer to report a social dinner to the company's accounting department as a business expense, would you do as instructed or refuse? 61% of the people said they would do as instructed. The next question I asked is, do you believe it is acceptable for employees of a company to take home office supplies such as paper, sticky notes, staplers, etc. for personal use? 76% rather of the respondents replied no to that.
Liars.
Yeah.
Are you lying right now?
Yeah, I said.
That would be a good follow-up question, yeah.
That would have been a good question.
Are you a liar?
Yeah. How would you rate your ability to lie? lie on a survey. Do you believe most people are generally honest? And this one, in light of the stuff we were just talking about, is kind of interesting. 55% of the people said yes. 35% of the people said no, and 8%, or 10% rather, were unsure. And then the last
Are you
question-
one of those honest people?
Yeah, I should. Yeah. Where would you fall in this pot? And the last question I asked is, who do you believe is primarily responsible for establishing standards for acceptable behavior in society? And I purposely worded this question to be somewhat ambiguous. I didn't want it to try to pin anybody down to American society or your city or town or to a specific community. I wanted it to people look at it in broader terms than that, just society in general. And 41% of the people responded that they believe that, and their choices were God/deity, government, majority of citizens, or individual/self. 41% of the people responded individual/self. And 31% of the people said God or deity. 21% of the people, or 20% of the people said majority of citizens, and 4% said government, or 4 people said government, 8% of the respondents said government. And since I turned this into you, Brad, some of the surveys that I've gotten back in, I went ahead and just for fun tallied those numbers up.
Right,
And
right.
it's actually tied now. There are the same number of people who responded majority of citizens and God, deity.
Wow.
So there's
Guys, the one thing I want you to get from that last question is you've got approximately 70% of the people who say we get our standard for acceptable behavior from something other than God.
exactly.
70% of who he asked. That's atrocious.
And that was Christian. The people who responded individual/self were not all non-Christians. There were some Christians who responded that they believe that the individual sets the standards for behavior in society. So,
I mean,
Wow.
but when you think about it, you do the same thing as well. I mean, I think every one of us do. I mean, we set the Christian standard, but like when I look at Mark Hanstein, he's my he's not his idol, but I look at him, he reflects a certain lifestyle. I'm like, man, I really want to be like that. I study God's word. I want to be as good as him, you know?
right, but who sets Mark Hanstein's standard?
Well, God.
And that's
Right.
the point that I was trying to drive at. And I get the choice. I get to decide whether or not I want to follow that standard or whether I want to choose another standard. So from that
Right.
standpoint, I have a role to play in that. But ultimately, if there is such a thing as universal truth, then it has to derive from one source. And that source
Right.
is...
Well, couldn't some people be kind of confused on that? Like, cause
Now listen to how he phrased the question. He said, "Who do you believe is primarily responsible for establishing standards for acceptable behavior in society?" So you get to pick one. It's either God, the majority of citizens, government, or yourself.
Oh, okay.
The majority of people pick self.
Wow.
Which is, it's funny, Chris, because you started out asking about absolute truth.
Absolutely.
And, you got all these people say, oh, yeah, we can define absolute truth. And then your last question is basically, in a roundabout way, is saying, where does that truth come from?
Exactly. Well, and after I started getting these results back, and I saw that this number was a lot, the numbers were completely out of whack from what I figured that they would be, I started second guessing whether or not whether I worded my question right.
Yeah.
But I don't know how better I could have worded it than
Yep.
what I did. So.
Good job. What about follow-up, guys? What do you think?
I don't know, that was a pretty good survey.
I would ask, Chris, if you got a second, hold up your what you sent me so they can see. He put it in pie charts, made it incredible. He gets a smiley face for prettiness because it made it really easy for me to look at quickly and to be able to kind of see what's going on. What else? What would be something to follow up?
I think I should have asked, and I kind of went back and forth as to whether or not to ask some specific questions about who they were and what they believed. but I didn't do that because I wanted to get just sort of the aggregate of everybody and just throw it all into one kind of soup. But I could have asked, the question, do you consider yourself a Christian or not?
Okay.
That would have been interesting.
What else, guys? The other thing that when you ask that question, are you a Christian or how do you identify yourself spiritually? One of the more neater things is you can start looking not just at that question, but you can start taking that question and comparing it to all the other answers. So when you look at, okay, how many people who said I'm a Christian believe in an absolute truth? How many people who said I'm a Christian believe that they get the absolute standard from themselves? So you can use that one question in analyzing some of the other stuff.
Yeah.
All right, good job. Very good job. Who would like to be next?
I'll go.
All right.
I did mine on abortion, but I took a little bit different view of it. Mainly the reason because when I first took this class, the first day we had abortion, I was extremely uninformed and ignorant about what abortion even was. I had the visual, this is how simple I had the visual that when you crack an egg and put it in a pan, that's basically what the result, what was happening and stuff, was just like scrambled an egg kind of thing. I had no idea. It was very powerful after we got done that one day, especially after the partial birth and all that stuff. So what I did is I got online and I found an article from East Summit, Missouri. There's a Baptist church that had put up crosses on their front lawn. Each cross represents 100,000 abortions or murders for children. So I'll read you the article real quick. It's a short one. It says, motorists passing by the Oakwood Baptist Church, located at the corner of Lee Summit Road and Woods Chapel Road near Lakewood, cannot help but notice the 500 crosses covering much of the church's front lawn. The cross display is part of the church's efforts to commemorate the 37th anniversary of the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision that legalized abortion. Since that date, more than 50 million unborn babies have been killed by abortion. Each of these crosses on the church lawn represents 100,000 babies whose lives have been lost. Marilyn Feaster, member of the Oakwood Baptist Church and the Church Morals Concern Committee, said millions of people across the country recognize abortion for what it is, the taking of an innocent human life. It breaks our heart to know that 50 million children have been killed and we want to commemorate their deaths. But it is also heartbreaking to know millions of women have been permanently damaged by abortion, some emotionally, some physically, and some both. So some accuse pro-lifers of being offensive when we call attention to abortion, but how much more offensive is the act itself? It is the church prayer that this cross display will cause women in a crisis pregnancy to choose life choose life for their unborn child. Feaster commented further, Americans everywhere recognize the terrible tragedy of September 11, 2001, when more than 3,000 lives were lost due to a senseless act of terrorists. But abortion has taken lives of over 3,500 babies each day for 37 years since 1973. Should we also be horrified by this senseless act of violence? So I went after denominational, atheists, creationists, evolution. I just went after this whole mass of people. I did it by email to about 30 people that I knew. Plus I went to the mall, and I experienced exactly what Dustin did. I parked in the car. I went to
That funny to you, Brad?
I went to the dollar store and I bought clipboards and pens and copied all my surveys, and then I went out and parked in the parking lot. I was skipping in the mall and stuff. And about an hour and a half later, I was walking back out of the mall with one survey completed and a realization of why I chose to be a preacher, because these people are walking around in a self-induced coma. Most of them, I couldn't even get past the, hey, would you mind helping me? I'm a Bible student. And they said, no, we're okay. So it goes to go with Chris's statistics on, who thinks they're actually, who's who in this world. I was just like, I got to the truck and my head was down. I was like, oh my word. But anyway, so I asked 6 questions. The first 5 questions were simple, yes or no or male. So question 1 was, what's your gender, male or female? Question 2 was, what was your age? I didn't want to know. I didn't ask about religious values because I didn't want that to enter into the results, I guess. Just because somebody said, "Oh, I'm a Christian," I need to answer a certain way. So, question was 3. I go, did you realize that abortions were happening at this alarming rate? Question 4 was, did the statistics contained in this article surprise you? Question 5 was, do you think the population of the United States knows this is happening daily? And then question 6 was, I have 10 subjects about abortion. I asked them to rank them. Number 1 being the most important reason they think people have abortion, and then of course down to 10 the least. So I got, and they are teenage pregnancy, couples breakup or a split, selfishness, lack of education to the options of adoption, career decisions, lack of education to what the procedure is and how it is performed, greed, in parentheses like doctors, lawyers, clinics, rape and incest, child not wanted or a financial burden, and then lack of godliness in the person, the family, and the world. So, like I said, I only could get 29 people, and they ranged from 18 to 75. Like I said, denominational Christians, members of the church. So question number 3, the first yes or no, it was, did you realize that abortions were happening at this alarming rate? 17 people said yes, and 12 said no. So that is, I can go down to some. So let's see. And then I put, did the statistics contained in this article surprise you? 16 said no, 13 said yes. Did you know this is where I was really shocked, because it didn't matter what they answered above. Almost everybody answered no on this. So, do you think the population of the United States knows this is happening daily?
Yeah, that surprised me a little bit. And it's basically like, I'm informed, but nobody else is.
Right.
Yeah.
So 26 people said no, and then 3 said yes. So the top 10, and this kind of surprised me because of the people that I surveyed weren't all members of the church. The number 1 was lack of godliness in the person, family, and world. Number 2 was selfishness. Number 3 was child not wanted or a financial burden, which also ranked number 5 on the list. Number 4 was lack of education for options of adoption, which also ranked 7th. On the little. Because what I did is I got a chart, an Excel chart, and then wherever the things hit, whatever the answers hit, I had the questions on this side, and I put 1 through 10 on the top. So I had 2 of them that hit the chart in both places, 3rd and. And that really threw me for a while, by the way. I was expecting to see. I was like, yeah, I'm doing this wrong. But anyway, of course, number 5 was child not wanted, financial burden again. And then 6 was career decision. 7 was lack of education to the options of adoption. 8 was greed. 9 was couple breakups or split, and 10 was rape. It really hurt my feelings because I didn't hurt my feelings. I was depressed because lack of education on how the procedure is and how it is performed, didn't even rate in the top 10.
Wow.
Because I'll tell you what, man, after hearing that lady that we listened to, she didn't know either, and that was just like, it was kind of chilling. Anyway, so it's kind of a summary out of it is out of the 29 people that filled out the survey, 58% know that abortion is an issue in the United States, and the shock or wow factor of the tragedy was only felt by 55% of the people that took the survey. 89% of the polled people think that American people are in the dark about the statistics. This is controlled by the media as a taboo subject, which the American people seem to like their heads buried in the sand more than being informed of the murder that is happening in the clinics of this country. I also found out, as I polled the public, that they were extremely closed-minded to even taking the survey, let alone addressing the slaughter of innocent children. And then I noted to myself, I looked at the results, and the top 3 ratings that I got, 1, 2, 3, can all be linked back to God not being our number one choice in the world.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, if you take God away, if you're self-centered, and if you don't view children as a heritage from the Lord, then the top 3 reasons I give you pretty much all center around one central point, and that is whether or not there is a God.
Yeah.
I think what kind of surprises me is a lot of people in the that are in the church, and then the people that are not in the church. The people that are not in the church seem like sometimes seem more religious or more obedient than we are. I say we included.
Welcome to the real world, brother. That's going to be a frustration that you will have from now, probably until they put you in the ground. One of the biggest things that we're fighting right now in the church is apathy. It's the fact that you got people who know what they should be doing and say they're a Christian, but realistically it's only in word. It's not in deed. So, all right, who's next? Well, before we do that, any other comments, things that you think he should have maybe followed up with or brought out? I do like your 6th question. I thought that was where you really landed the plane, where he basically said, look, tell me why you think people are doing this. And I found it interesting that most people are pointing towards lack of godliness. It's kind of like in a lot of what you all are doing, people are hinting at the fact that we need a God, but yet they are still very self-absorbed.
Yeah.
And so they're not willing to fully go that way. Anything else? Comments? All right, good job. Next. Mr. Dean. Dun, dun, Dean, did you get a new haircut?
No.
Okay, just checking.
Okay. What I did my survey on was society. I wanted to see how big of an effect the homosexual community and their push for what I would call special rights, not equal rights, how big an effect that's had on the population since the big push, since really beginning in the 1970s. And so I surveyed 40 people through Facebook and the Survey Gizmo idea. 10 of those people were Christians, and the age range was about, I interviewed people from 18 to about 30, since that's really the next generation that's going to determine whether the movement of the homosexual community is pretty much reinforced throughout society or whether it dies or not. And so I asked 5 questions. The first question being, would you say that your definition of marriage corresponds to the Bible's definition as between one man and one woman for life? And 23 people said yes, 13 people said no, and 4 people said they were undecided or not sure. My second question, do you support the current push to overturn the military policy of don't ask, don't tell? I asked that simply because that's one of the hot issues that is on the plate of the Senate. 13 people said yes, 23 people said no, 4 people said they weren't sure or undecided. The next question I asked was, do you consider homosexuality a genetic occurrence in which someone is born with a gay gene? 13 people said yes, 25 people said no, and 2 people said they were unsure or undecided. I said, my next question was, do you think banning or allowing gay marriage is a federal or state issue? 19 people said 19 people said state. No, 19 people said federal. 17 people said state, and 4 people said undecided or not sure. My final question, not my final question, but my 5th question was, do you think gay couples should be allowed to adopt a child? 15 people said yes, 22 people said no, and 3 people said they were undecided or not sure. And then I kind of asked a statement question, some of which I don't think I put that in the write-up that I gave you, Brad, because a lot of them didn't come in until later. But I asked a statement question for Facebook and the inbox message they gave me, and I asked them to give me one positive aspect homosexuality offers to the improvement of society, whether that be scientifically or economically or whatnot. And so some of the responses I got were pretty interesting. One person who's a Christian said that, I think that having gay couples in society, in which we have gay couples in society, provides diversity, and couples that are allowed to adopt children that straight folks don't want, which is very beneficial for society. That was a member of the church.
Wow.
Another person said that homosexuals and the ability to marry is positive because it's positively affects society and their ability to express their individuality. Let's see. Another person says we should allow them to be gay and express themselves because God says we can't judge others until we are perfect ourselves, which obviously they've misspoken on that, misinterpreted that. This was actually one that kind of made me laugh. This is a gentleman who I personally know who's not a Christian. Who's not a Christian, but he's quote religious. And he said, God intended it to be a woman and a man, which is why it was Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve. Another person that I asked said it allows people to live how they want to without being ridiculed for who they are and how they choose to live their life. So one thing that I thought was interesting is that you have a correlation that of the people that were there that took the survey, there were some people which said, I believe that marriage is between man and a woman, but at the same time I wouldn't mind if a homosexual couple was allowed to adopt. And I thought
basically be tolerant.
Yeah, it should be tolerated. Yep. And the people, and another thing that I found in the survey is that of the Christians that I interviewed, there were 3 Christians. There were 3 Christians and 1 was undecided. But 3 Christians said that they would be okay with homosexual couples adopting a child, and 1 Christian was undecided. And so, what I found from it overall is that there are a lot of people who are either mixed or not sure about how they feel about homosexuality, because at one point they say, hey, I'm not for the don't ask, don't tell policy to be overturned, but I think that people are born gay. Or I think that marriage is between man and woman, but I think they should be able to adopt. And but for the most part, the movement really hasn't done as much as the media would like us to think it's done, because there's still a vast majority of people that think it's a state issue, whereas a lot of media want it to be a federal issue. There are a vast majority of people that think marriage is between a man and a woman, whereas the media tries to portray that there are a bunch of people that say, that are outside of the gay community, that say, hey, there should be homosexual marriage. And so I thought that was a very interesting survey, and it kind of blew my mind.
Stick a pin in it. We're going to come back to you when we come back from the break. So put a pin in yourself. And we'll come back.
Brad. The Bible's against
Well, that wasn't on your survey.
I'll stick a pin.
Y'all take a break.